Before I even get into this, I need you to do one thing for me. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching this from and what time it is there right now. I don't know why, but knowing someone else is out there listening makes this a little easier to say out loud. I've gone back and forth on whether I should tell this story at all. Some things are easier to leave buried, especially when they happened that far north, where the land feels empty but somehow never really is. What you're about to hear isn't something I read online or heard secondhand. This is my own experience, straight from the Alaska pipeline, during 5 shifts that still mess with my head years later. When people think about working up there, they picture good money, long hours, and brutal cold. And yeah, all of that's true. What they don't talk about is the silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that presses in on you like the land itself is holding its breath. The kind that makes you feel watched even when you're miles from the nearest person. I'm not telling this for clout or shock value. I didn't believe in this kind of stuff before I took that job. I was practical, grounded, and honestly just chasing a paycheck. But Alaska has a way of stripping that mindset right off you. So let me rewind to the beginning, to why I even took that pipeline job in the first place, and how isolation out there hit way harder than I ever expected. Asterisk I took the Alaska pipeline job for the same reason a lot of guys do. I needed the money, and I needed a reset. Life down south felt noisy, crowded, like I was stuck spinning my wheels. Everyone I talked to made it sound simple. Long shifts, solid pay, keep your head down, do the work, then go home with a fat check. They said the isolation was rough, sure, but manageable. Like it was just another inconvenience, same as bad weather or crappy hours. At first, that actually sounded appealing. No traffic, no drama, no people breathing down your neck. Just you, the job, and miles of untouched land. I figured I'd tough it out, stack some cash, and come back changed in a good way. Stronger, sharper, maybe even calmer. But the reality hit fast. This wasn't remote, like a quiet town or a cabin getaway. This was empty in a way that messes with your sense of scale. The kind of place where the horizon feels too far away and the sky feels too big. You'd step outside and realize there was nothing around you for miles. No houses, no lights, just snow, steel, and land that didn't care if you were there or not. People warned me about the cold, but no one really warned me about what the isolation does to your head. Days blur together. Your thoughts get louder. Little sounds stick out more than they should. And then there were the looks I got from some of the older workers when I told them I was new. Not rude looks, more like measured. Like they were deciding how much to say and how much to keep to themselves. One guy pulled me aside, my first week, and told me not to wander too far from the line after dark. When I asked why, he just shrugged and said, "You'll hear things you can't explain." I laughed it off, thought he was messing with me, trying to scare the new guy, but he didn't laugh back. He just told me to trust my instincts up there, because Alaska doesn't give second chances. That stuck with me more than I expected. I started noticing little things after that. Radios crackling when no one was talking. Long stretches where even the wind seemed to disappear. And that feeling like something was off creeping in earlier every night. By the time my first real shift out on the line rolled around, I wasn't just thinking about the paycheck anymore. I was starting To understand that life on the pipeline followed its own rules. Rules nobody bothered to write down. And that's when I really got my first taste of what working out there was actually like. Day in and day out, surrounded by silence that didn't feel natural at all. Asterisk life on the pipeline settled into a rhythm pretty quick. But it wasn't the kind of routine that makes you comfortable. It was the kind that wears you down slow, day after day, until you stop questioning things. The environment alone was enough to keep you on edge. The cold wasn't just cold, it was aggressive. It bit through layers, through gloves, through whatever confidence you walked in with. Metal groaned when temperatures dropped, and the pipeline itself sounded alive sometimes, like it was shifting or breathing under the pressure. Shifts were long. 12 hours felt like 20 when the sun barely showed up, and when it did, it hung low and dull, like it didn't want to be there either. You'd work surrounded by miles of white and steel, and after a while the silence stopped feeling empty. It felt heavy, like something pressing against your ears. You'd catch yourself craving any noise, just to prove the world was still moving. What messed with me most were the rules no one ever officially said out loud. You didn't whistle at night. You didn't wander off the lit paths. And you definitely didn't ask too many questions about things you thought you heard but couldn't quite explain. Everyone followed those rules, even the guys who acted tough and laughed everything off, especially them. Break rooms were quiet. Conversations stayed shallow. Weather, equipment, schedules. If the topic drifted towards strange stuff sounds, shadows, radios, acting up, someone would always shut it down. Fast. A cough, a joke, a sudden reason to step outside. It was like there was an understanding that certain things didn't belong in the open air. Nights were the worst. Darkness in Alaska doesn't roll. In it slams down. The lights along the pipeline carved out narrow tunnels of visibility, and everything beyond that just disappeared. Standing out there, you'd feel small in a way that messed with your spine. Like if something stepped out of the dark, there'd be nowhere to run and no one close enough to hear you yell. I started noticing how often guys checked over their shoulders, without realizing it. How radios were always kept close, volume turned up just a little louder than necessary. How nobody ever volunteered for extra time alone, even for overtime pay. By the time my first solo assignment came up, I already knew something wasn't right about this place. I couldn't put a name to it yet, couldn't explain it without sounding crazy, but I felt it deep in my gut. And that feeling followed me straight into my first real shift out there. When the silence stopped being background noise and started acting like it had a purpose of its own. Asterisk, the first shift alone was something else. I'd heard the warnings, caught the sideways glances from the veterans, but nothing really prepared me for what it felt like when the silence wrapped around me like a damn shroud. I walked out onto the line, gear strapped tight, radio squawking, faintly in my ear, but out there. Out there was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that felt loaded, like the world was holding its breath. Watching me, at first I tried to shake it off, told myself it was just nerves. The wind cutting through the pipeline, the snow crunching underfoot, all normal. But the deeper into the shift I got, the more that normal started to warp. The usual background noises stopped. No birds, no rustle of branches, not even the hum of machinery where it usually was. Just this deep, heavy silence that pressed against my ears and made my skin crawl. I remember pausing to radio in a routine check, expecting the usual crackle and reply, but the channel was dead. Nothing. Static, then nothing. I tried again. Still silence. It was like I'd stepped into a vacuum where even sound couldn't reach. That's when the unease settled in hard. Then came the moment I can't shake. I was moving along the pipeline, scanning for any sign of trouble, when I caught it this. Faint sound behind me. Not wind, not mechanical. It was soft, slow footsteps crunching in the snow. But when I turned, there was nothing. No one. I told myself maybe it was an echo, my own footsteps catching in the snow, or some animal far off. But the sound kept pace, steady and deliberate, just out of sight. My heart started racing. I grabbed my radio again, voice shaking, but all I got was silence. No chatter, no reassurance. That's when I realized this wasn't just a job anymore. This silence was watching me, following me. By the time my shift ended, I was soaked in sweat beneath my layers, heart still pounding. I couldn't explain it, and I sure as hell didn't want to admit it out loud. But something had shifted that night, something that told me the wilderness out there wasn't as empty as I thought, and this was only the beginning. That second shift, man, it threw me off even worse than the first. After what I went through on that first night, I thought maybe it was just a fluke. My nerves playing tricks, you know. But when you're out there, miles from anything familiar, those little noises don't just happen, they haunt you. They get under your skin. And on that night, the footsteps came back. Only this time, they weren't behind me. They were out there somewhere, just beyond where my flashlight could reach. I was alone again, walking the pipeline in near darkness, the cold sharper than ever. The silence was still heavy, but now it wasn't just quiet, it was tense. Like the whole wilderness was holding something back. I kept my radio close, fingers twitching on the buttons, half expecting someone to cut in and break the stillness. But nothing. Just the steady crunch of snow under my boot sand. Then, out of nowhere, another crunch. At first I froze. Swear to God, my heart felt like it was going to beat right out of my chest. I spun around, shining my flashlight into the black. Nothing, not a damn thing. But I knew those footsteps weren't mine. They were too deliberate, too steady, and way too close to be some animal wandering by. I tried to brush it off, told myself it was probably another worker somewhere else on the line, or maybe an animal stalking in the distance. But the truth, it didn't sit right with me. The footsteps seemed to echo in the silence, like they were pacing me, keeping time with my own. Every time I stopped moving, they stopped too. Every time I walked, they followed. My mind was racing, trying to rationalize what my senses screamed at me to believe. Maybe it was paranoia, maybe exhaustion, maybe the cold messing with me. But whatever it was, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone out there, and that whoever or whatever it was didn't want me to be. By the time that shift ended, my hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped my gear. I wanted to get the hell out of there, but I also knew I had to keep going. The work wasn't going to do itself, and no one was going to come check on me out here. Asterisk that third shift. It was the one where things crossed the line I didn't even know existed. I was out there, wrapped up in the usual cold and dark, radio clutched in my hand like a lifeline. Normally, that static hiss was just white noise in the background, something to remind me I wasn't completely cut off. But that night, the static got worse, more intense, like it was trying to say something. At first, I thought my radio was busted, or maybe the weather was screwing with the signal. Then, out of the crackle, I heard a voice. Soft, distant, almost like a whisper, but definitely human. It wasn't the control center or any of the crew I knew. It was something else. Something that didn't belong. I tried to call back, but all I got was more static and a faint, eerie laugh that sent a chill right through me. The kind of laugh that doesn't sound like a joke, but something darker. I reported it back to control, my voice steady, but my heart hammering. They told me it was probably just interference, equipment glitch, nothing to worry about. But the way they said it felt off, like they wanted me to drop it fast. When I asked if anyone else had heard anything like that, the silence on the other end was telling. No one wanted to admit it. That voice haunted me the whole shift. Every time I thought I'd get a break, that crackling would creep back in, whispering nonsense that I couldn't quite make out. It was like the radio was a gateway, something trying to reach out from beyond the emptiness around me. By the end of the night, I was paranoid as hell. Every bump, every creak in the pipeline sounded like a warning. The silence had shifted into something active, something watching and waiting. And that voice, it wasn't just a glitch. It was a message, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to know what it meant. Asterisk that fourth shift was the one, where the fears stopped being just a feeling and became something I could actually see. I'd been on edge for weeks, hearing footsteps, strange noises, and that creepy voice on the radio, but nothing prepared me for the moment I caught a shadow moving near the pipeline. It wasn't just a trick of the light or some animal. This was something different. Something wrong. I was out there, flashlight scanning the endless snow and steel, when out of the corner of my eye, I saw it a dark shape slipping between the beams, just at the edge of the light. It moved too smoothly to be a person, but it had to be. The way it paused and shifted felt deliberate, like it was watching me as much as I was watching it. My heart hit my throat, and every instinct screamed at me to run. But I was trained to stay put, to keep my cool and follow protocol no matter what. I froze, barely daring to breathe, watching that shadow stretch and blend back into the darkness. The radio in my hand felt heavy, useless. I wanted to call for backup, but I knew what would happen. The control center would tell me to stay calm, that it was probably just a worker or some wildlife. But deep down, I knew this was something else. That moment changed everything. Fear wasn't just a warning anymore. It was real and immediate. It settled over me like a second skin, making every noise sharper, every shadow deeper. I kept telling myself it was better to keep moving, keep my eyes peeled, but that shadow followed me in my mind long after I left the line. When I finally got back to camp, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been stared at by something not meant to be seen. The guys around the fire noticed, but no one pushed me for details. It was like we all understood the unspoken rules. Some things out here don't get talked about, and some shadows are better left alone. That night, I realized survival out there wasn't just about dealing with the cold or the work. It was about keeping your mind sharp and your fear controlled. Because out in that endless wilderness, The line between reality and whatever else is out there starts to blur. Asterisk, that fifth shift was the one that nearly broke me. All the weird noises, the footsteps, the shadows, they weren't just messing with my head anymore. They had turned into something real, something dangerous. I remember stepping out into the bitter cold, flashlight cutting through the darkness. Like usual, but this time, there was a heaviness in the air. Like the whole place was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The silence was different that night. Not just quiet, but thick, almost suffocating. I was halfway through my patrol when I saw it again. Not just a shadow, but something. Moving with purpose, just beyond the edge of my light. I froze. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my training told me to stay calm, to assess the situation. But this wasn't something I could assess. It was a presence, and it was close. Then, I heard it, a low, guttural sound, like a growl mixed with something almost human. It wasn't an animal I'd ever heard before. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I grabbed my radio and tried to call in, but the static swallowed my words. The voice on the other end was gone, and I was alone. The thing moved closer, its shape flickering in and out of the shadows. I caught a glimpse at twisted, unnatural silhouette that didn't belong on this earth. Fear hit me like a freight train. I had to make a choice: run back to camp or keep moving forward and risk whatever this thing was. I ran. I didn't look back. The snow beneath me blurred as I pushed every muscle to sprint through the cold night, adrenaline drowning out everything else. When I finally made it back to the safety of the camp lights, I was shaking so bad I could barely hold my gear. Nobody said a word about what I'd seen. They just nodded, knowing without asking that the pipeline hides things that don't want to be found. That night changed me. It wasn't just a job anymore. It was a fight to stay sane, to survive something no one really talks about. And it made me realize why so many guys leave and never come back. After that night, I wasn't sure if I was losing it or if there really was something out there. But then, talking to some of the older guys around camp, things started to make a little more sense, though not in a way I expected. These weren't just workers. They were survivors of something nobody really puts into words. The old-timers don't talk about it much, at least not openly. But when they do, it's always with a quiet kind of respect and a warning. They told me about the unspoken rules why you never whistle at night, why you don't wander off the pipeline after dark, and why certain shifts are better left alone. It wasn't just superstition, it was survival. They admitted there were things out there, things that didn't fit into any explanation, strange shadows, noises that didn't belong to any animal, and those footsteps that followed no matter where you went. Most workers just learned to ignore them, chalking it up to exhaustion or the harsh conditions. But the truth is, everyone out there knows it's real. They just don't say it because saying it out loud makes it more real, more dangerous. Some shared stories about guys who vanished or came back, changed, quiet, jittery, like they'd seen something no one else should ever see. The kind of fear that sticks to you, no matter how far away you get from the pipeline. And that fear passes down from one crew to the next, like a secret legacy you don't want but can't escape. It was clear to me then that this place wasn't just a job. It was a test, a challenge to keep your mind and soul intact when everything around you feels like it wants to pull you under. The silence, the shadows, The voices on the radio, they're part of the pipeline's dark side. The part nobody wants to admit is real. Hearing those admissions hit me harder than any shadow or whisper ever did. Because it meant I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. And it meant I wasn't alone. Quitting the pipeline wasn't a decision I took lightly. For a long time, I kept telling myself I was tough enough to handle it, that I could outlast the cold, the silence, and whatever else was lurking out there. But after those shifts, after feeling watched and followed and hearing voices that shouldn't be, something inside me cracked. The psychological toll hit harder than the cold ever did. Every night, I found myself jumping at shadows, heart racing. At every little sound, sleep became a joke. Nights filled with nightmares, and days blurred into exhaustion. The isolation that once felt like freedom turned into a trap, tightening around my mind like a noose. When I tried to talk about it, the official line was always the same: equipment glitches, weather interference, exhaustion messing with perception. They painted it like it was all in my head, a side effect to the job. But I knew better. Those explanations felt hollow, like smoke screens to cover something no one wanted to face. The truth was, I'd seen and heard things that didn't make sense, things that didn't have a rational explanation, but felt undeniably real. And the longer I stayed, the more I realized this wasn't just a job, it was a test of sanity. A place where the line between reality and something else blurred until you couldn't tell which side you were on. Leaving the pipeline was like waking up from a bad dream. But the nightmares didn't stop. That experience stuck with me, changed how I see the world and what I believe is out there in the dark. I can't unsee what I saw or unhear what I heard. And honestly, some nights, I'm not sure I want to. If you're thinking about taking a job out on the pipeline or any of those remote, brutal places like it, here's what I want you to know before you pack your bags. It's not just about toughing out the cold or grinding through long shifts. It's about what's lurking in the silence, in the shadows, and in those moments when you're so far from help you start to question everything. You've got to respect the isolation. It messes with your head more than you can imagine. There's a reason the old guys have all those unspoken rules, and it's not just superstition. Don't wander off the marked paths. Don't whistle or call out at night. And listen to your gut when it tells you something's wrong. Because out there, your instincts might be the only thing keeping you alive. Even after I left, that fear didn't just vanish. It sticks around like a shadow you can't shake, especially when it gets quiet and the wind dies down. I still catch myself hearing footsteps in the snow or static on the radio when there's nothing there. And those questions, I still have them. What was out there? What does it want? And how many others never made it back because they didn't listen? The pipeline isn't just a place on a map. It's a line between what we understand and what we don't. And crossing it changes you. Maybe it changes you forever. So, if you choose to go out there, go in, eyes wide open. Don't ignore the warnings. Don't brush off the strange feelings. Because out in that wilderness, the silence isn't empty, it's alive. All right. Before I let you go, here's one last thing I want you to think about. Something that still sticks with me after all these years. Out there on the pipeline, in that frozen wilderness, the scariest thing wasn't just the cold or the isolation. It wasn't even the footsteps or the shadows. It was the feeling that you're never truly alone. Like whatever's out there, it's watching, waiting. Not just for me, but for anyone who dares to step onto that line. And maybe that's what keeps so many people from talking about it. Because once you know, once you feel it deep in your bones, there's no going back to the way things were. You carry it with you, like a shadow that follows, no matter how far you run. So here's what I want you to do right now. Take a moment and drop a comment down below. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Hearing that, knowing someone else is out there listening, makes this whole thing a little less lonely. It's strange, I know, but sometimes the smallest connection can be the most powerful. If you've got your own story, something strange or unexplained, don't be shy. Share it. This isn't just my story, it's ours. And the more we talk about the things that haunt us, the less power they have over us. Thanks for sticking with me through this. If you liked the story, hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Because out here, in the dark and cold, there's always more lurking just beyond the light. And remember, wherever you are, whatever time it is, stay safe. Keep your eyes open and your instincts sharp. You never know what's watching.